What's up, Yellowjackets fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, and I am with my co-host and good friend, rocking a Terrifier 2 shirt over there, Dr. Zayas God. Look at that shirt. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
this is another Terror Threads exclusive. Got this with my Puppet Master shirt. And I know we might not agree wholeheartedly on Terrifier 2, but this is a kick-ass shirt.
Oh yeah, I agree on that. Yeah. Terror Threads, so that's different than the other websites that you've been using, right?
Yeah, I've actually had to write down for kids in my horror club, but they're like, "Can you write down a list of the websites where you get your shirts?" So I'm like, Fright Rags, Cavity Colors, Gutter Garbs, Creeperama, Terror Threads. There, I just shouted out a whole bunch of you.
Yeah.
You've basically helped me acquire my wardrobe as we as we talk about horror on YouTube.
Yes. And there was a little bit of horror in episode 5 of season 2 of Yellowjackets, entitled Two Truths, One Lie. And so, Danny, I want to hear a truth or a lie. Did you enjoy this episode?
I enjoyed this episode a lot. I also had a couple of nitpicky things with it as the episode went along.
Sure.
I thought I thought of what you said about how you thought episode 4 was a little slow and dragged a little bit, and I thought this is the kind of episode that kind of brings you back. It introduced it like brings back it brings back old characters. It introduces some more lore. It posits some questions that are going to get people talking around the water cooler. You know, if people still do that in 2023,
Right.
you know, oh my God, what do you think those visions that Nat was having and the antler queen that Lottie was seeing, like what's going on?
Yep.
You know, oh my God, Pete, like where do you think Javi's been? So like there's a lot of really interesting questions that come out of this episode.
Yes.
I didn't love every aspect of it.
Okay.
I also really like some of the character advancements that we saw.
Okay.
I'll just throw out there since we'll talk about it. Like, I had a feeling we were going in that direction with 1996 Misty, where she was going to get a little too comfortable with her bestie and reveal something that, you know, we're so used to binging shows. It's almost hard to watch a show once a week. And I binged season 1. I didn't watch season 1 when it was on. So I was able to, and I have to admit, I'm having a little trouble this season. It's hard when you're like, I binged 10 episodes of this show in 2.5 days. And now it's like I have to wait a full week to watch this. And then like I'm watching it and I'm like thinking, as I'm watching it, thinking about issues that we're going to bring up on our podcast. And so there are times where I'm like, are they ever going to bring up the fact that Misty destroyed the black box? Like she's the entire reason that they're out there right now. Or is that just like some forgotten little detail that was and the fact that they brought that back up made me so happy and made me like, holy shit, they like all those little things that the fans have in our heads, the writers, the directors, they have those things like plotted out, and you know they're gonna put the pin in and then draw the line all the way to this episode here. So that excited me a little bit. But yeah, this has been a very like 3-minute long explanation to say yes, I like this episode.
Well, what we like to do, like just like Sherry and I used to do for season 1, is we like to break it down by character and just kind of do each character's arc. And I think that we should start with Misty. I think that like Misty's 1996 story might have been the most interesting story this week, or at least second most interesting story. But then her present day still kind of suffers. In the present day, we have her going with Elijah Wood's character to Lottie's cult compound, and with their journey, they're kind of bored. They've been listening to show tunes this whole time, and Elijah Wood says, "Hey, let's play Two Truths, One Lie." And I think that's a great kind of plot tool, basically, to get a little information in there. I was thinking that Misty was going to reveal something about the Yellowjackets in her Two Truths and One Lie. We only ended up getting two, I'm assuming, truths, which included that she hates monkeys and that she thinks we're asking the wrong questions about the moon landing. But I think that the purpose of that scene, for the most part, was just to kind of mirror what happened in 1996, where she's basically spilling the beans to her new friend.
Yeah,
So they're
and
just
the fact
revealing.
that she's also not a very good actress and she's not good at lying, so
Yeah.
she probably couldn't even be bothered to, tell a lie for the game.
Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So it kind of hurts when that girl, what was that girl's name that was her friend, by the way? Do you remember?
Yes, it was Kristen because she was called Crystal the Pistol by the side, and she loved the nickname so much that she didn't even correct her own teammates who got her name wrong.
Yes. That in itself was like really sad too, because you have these two like teenage girls just basically so desperate for the approval of the other people on their team and just wanting a friend, and they're just so overjoyed with each other when they can kind of be their real selves. And I guess we always knew that was going to end tragically. You said you kind of knew it was going to end with a death. Did you think, though, that, I mean, first off, when they're at the cliff's edge, just seeing the cliff's edge and our experience of reviewing shows and stuff, wasn't it like you saw the cliff, you're like, okay, the girl's going to die going over the cliff, right?
I just had a feeling like we've been talking about this for episodes now of our podcast and episodes of Yellowjackets, where we feel like there's going to be a thinning of the herd of the 1996 Yellowjackets. Like
Right.
we know way back in episode 1, the very first episode, the girl falls into the pit, she's dead, they eat her. We've talked about the coach and how we think he's on borrowed time. So I always get suspicious in a show like this when they start to give a lot of screen time to a character that doesn't usually get a lot of screen time.
Right.
Because it's usually a like in on a medical drama, they'll say, oh, like, oh, the person's coming back, and it's all just like, oh, everything's fine. They're like, but then all of a sudden everything crashes and the person dies, and you're like, oh, okay. It was like one last farewell for that character.
Right.
And I got a lot of that. Like the vibe was right off the bat. Like they're in the cabin. They're like, who would you invite to dinner? They were doing that, like, we're besties game. I was like, okay, she's getting way too much screen time. Something bad is going to happen. And then when they're at the cliff's edge and they're telling secrets, I'm like, this is probably where something's going to happen. I thought Misty was going to push her.
Correct. Right.
And then accidentally be like, oh no, like legitimate, be like, oh my God, I didn't mean to do that. But like Misty is a terrifying character.
Yeah.
And I actually did like the present day stuff with Misty because she is always so sure that she is doing the right thing, which makes her, as Elijah Wood pointed out, the perfect psychopath, the perfect serial killer. She always views like and like they have this interaction at the fence where she's like, we're rescuing you. You were kidnapped. And that's like, yeah, well, technically, yes, I was, but I don't like. And so in Misty's mind, yes, she's rescuing Nat. She's on a crusade to save her friend, but nothing else matters. And it doesn't matter how many, people have to be pushed aside to get to that.
Right.
And Elijah Wood like calls her straight out on it and like, you'd make a perfect serial killer. And she gets like offended and leaves the car.
Yeah.
And
I actually really liked that sequence too, because he references his grandmother and he says his grandmother killed his grandfather. And I like the fact that he made it seem like it wasn't that big a deal, or that like, it's okay. He even said that Misty it almost like he implied that she was like a good person, but she has this part of her personality, and it's like, this is just sort of a natural thing that happens, which makes me think that he himself might be pretty dangerous too. right? Like if he
Yeah.
doesn't treat death like, oh my God, you killed someone, then he could easily kill some other supporting character, I think.
Oh
Moving
yeah,
forward.
they're both super duper shady, but like we know that she's certain levels of insane and very scary. The fact that she probably for the first time in her life was given any validation right after the plane crashed.
Yeah.
And she took that glimmer of validation as a sense of, oh, out here they respect me. Let
Right.
me destroy the black box and prevent us from ever being found because they'll love me out here and
Right.
and they don't love me in the real world. That's everything you need to know about her. And like the fact that they brought that back and the fact that that was the catalyst for Kristen's death, I thought was, and it also it also helps her that there was this huge blizzard, so she's
Mm-hmm.
able to just kind of play it off like we got separated in the blizzard. I don't know what happened, and she's out there yelling like when they're all yelling for Shauna and Ty, and she's like, "Crystal."
Yeah, it's so
I
fucked
mean,
up.
and so eventually we know like they'll find her body probably in a couple days. Uh, and maybe they'll end up eating her, who knows. And maybe when they find her body, maybe Misty will be the one that finds her body, and because now that's food, Misty will get validation again from the group for finding a fresh food source. So who knows? But
Yeah.
Misty's obviously had she's obviously had a long life of manipulating the situations and the people around her.
Yeah.
And I thought this was probably one of the better Misty episodes.
Yeah, it definitely for this season. Absolutely. I think it's probably the best Misty episode this season. Um, it's funny because Kristen or Crystal's dead now, right? And I was trying to keep track of, well, how many supporting characters, how many fodder characters are there actually left in the cabin with the main characters? And I know that, like, with the people that watch the show and that actually comment on our videos, like, they know everybody's names. They're like, oh, this is this one and this is this one, right? But
There's
what's that?
well, I know there's the African American girl that had a scene with Ty.
Right.
There's that girl. There's the I think her name is Marie or Mary. She's the one who's like very on Lottie's side. Who and
Is she the tall brunette that was handing out the
yes,
cards that have the jar? Okay.
yes,
So a lot of people speculate that she's the one that falls in the pit in the first episode. I mean,
she's
that
the
looks
one that bears the most resemblance
right,
to
exactly.
that character. Yeah.
So there's her, the African American girl, and the African American girl is also the one with the mouse, right?
Yeah, I
That's not
think
a
so.
separate girl with the mouse, right? That's the same girl.
I don't know. Like this is the thing. Like there's a lot of fodder characters
Right.
whose names aren't prominently known.
Right. So okay, so there's at least her, and then there's the girl that you said is like Mary, who was giving out the cards. Then in this last episode, there was this girl, this like brunette, or not brunette, like blonde Caucasian girl. Where I was like, who the fuck is that? I felt like I'd never seen her before. She had one line of dialogue, and she kind of looked like Laura Lee, but she was like taller and not as like wholesome looking. But she had a line too. So there's essentially those three. Um,
I
and
go
then
back I go back to like my knowledge of soccer and I'm like, I think there's 11 players on a soccer field. So you figure 11 players, Javi, Travis, the coach, and Javi and Travis's father was there.
yeah,
So there's at least like 4 males that were there with the 11 girls. And then you figure there's what, 6 or 7 backup players.
yeah,
So there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 20 to 30 total people on the airplane,
right,
many of which died on the plane.
right.
So maybe there's even more. Maybe they took like an entire JV team and maybe it's 11 players and 11 backups. I don't know, but I would put it in the neighborhood of like 25 to 30
Yeah.
total people.
Well, it's interesting that you say that too, because with that scene with Taisha where she's talking to the other girl talked about a ritual that she would do with her friend before they would play a game. And then Taisha makes this joke saying, you guys would lose a lot. And I'm assuming that meant you guys on the other team would lose a lot. And I couldn't remember who was the girl that took the girl's place in the first episode. Remember, Thaisa breaks that girl's leg in the
Yeah.
first episode? So she obviously got replaced by someone. Was it one of the main characters? Or, no, right? Because all the main characters are like the older varsity characters.
Yeah. The girl who broke her leg was at the reunion.
Right. That girl
She
lived.
doesn't even go on the trip.
Right, right. And then I was wondering if the African American girl that's talking to Thaisa was like the girl that took that girl's place. You know what I'm saying? And that she was on like the junior team or whatever.
It could be. It could be. I mean, you bring up a good point because they do show that like they're playing like, Reds versus Greens or whatever. So there's got to be at least 22 total players, 11 versus 11. I don't know if they would bring the entire JV squad, but they do have a chartered flight. It's Lottie's parents' money, so maybe they just brought everybody. So, yeah.
Who knows? Yeah, well, with that being said, why don't we move on to the Nat and Lottie part? Because I kind of lump those two together at this point. The Lottie, like, adult actress is obviously kind of like established herself with like the main cast. Sherry isn't really a fan of this storyline. She doesn't really like what Nat's doing. She kind of feels like Nat in the present day doesn't seem as smart as Nat in the past. She also feels like Lottie in the present day doesn't really act like Lottie in the past. I don't like these scenes for the most part. I still kind of like them better than the Misty scenes, except for this episode. But in this episode, there's sort of this one annoying low part, and then there is this like great part at the very end. So the annoying low part is like Nat's been trying to get into Lottie's secret room that's locked to everyone in the community. And she finally does get in there and she finds these papers, she finds their cell phones, and she comes in and she kind of confronts Lottie. And sometimes in a TV show, scenes kind of fall flat just because they don't really have any kind of impact, or like it doesn't really change anything. It's just sort of almost like a misdirect. And so like Nat coming out and confronting Lottie and being like, she's crazy. She's trying to take all your stuff to all the cultists. Like, I just was like, I don't care at all, And it leads to a sequence where Lottie and Nat in the present day are trying to have like a vision, or have Nat have a vision. And that leads to like the coolest part of the episode, in my opinion, when we see Nat. First of all, one of the things I really loved was that she's trying to remember her last time with Travis, and then she's looking off at a beach, and you assume that she's in some kind of tropical location, some kind of oceanside location. But no. We actually see the reality, and she's doing cocaine in like some crappy hotel with Travis, right? And in that sequence, she has a vision after she almost dies. And this is real interesting and a little bit scary too, Danny, because you're always comparing this to Lost and you're worried about Lost. And one of the visions that she has is that everyone died on the plane. Sherry ended up saying, like, she's like, oh, what if everybody died and they're just ghosts? And I was like, no Lost. I don't want it to be that they died and this is just their ghosts. The other vision that she had,
I love that thinking back, like everybody after season 1 of Lost was like, what if they all died on the plane and this is just purgatory? And everybody's like, no, stop it. They're going to explain everything. Just keep going.
Right. And I'm truly hoping that's not the case with this show. I don't think that's the case with this show. But the other part that's interesting in that vision, it's not the coolest part. That the coolest part's at the very end. The other part is, correct me if I'm wrong, but they do show the Antler Queen on the plane at that point, and I could have sworn that it has her cowl like rolled up, and you see Juliette Lewis's face. Did you see that?
I didn't.
Okay.
Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention. I have to think that the creators of this show are aware. They're self-aware enough to know the similarities.
Oh yeah.
Between this show and Lost.
Yeah.
And knowing how Lost ended up and how chaotic and unsatisfying it was, and maybe that's just me talking. I don't know. There are people who will defend that show like it's a religion. I'm not going to mention my wife's name, but
Oops.
yeah. Uh, Knowing how unsatisfying that show ended and how much it felt like it was dragging by the last few seasons, I have to think that the creators of this show are aware of that and they're kind of playing that to their advantage, like hinting at, oh my God, maybe everybody's dead. And this is all just the wilderness is all just one version of purgatory, and the 25 years later is a different version of hell. And they got to be playing that off as like knowing that like people like us, fans like us, are going to run with these ideas.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that is the long game they're playing.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. And one of the things that we do as fans, and I love that you brought this term into our YouTube presence, our podcasts, is fantasy booking from wrestling, where we kind of speculate how everything's going to go down. And there's always that speculation of like, is there a supernatural element and how does it affect them and make them kind of become this cannibalistic tribe, right? Or is it going to be that it's not a supernatural element at all and they just kind of go crazy, Lord of the Flies style, right? Now, the show truly feels like it's leaning much more towards the supernatural element. And this was yet another thing I want to bring up that Sherry said too. The coolest part of the episode, in my opinion, was after they have that vision together, kind of like, Nat has the vision, but Lottie's there with her, guiding her through it. They kind of embrace, and then Lottie looks on the floor and she sees a shadow, and it's the Antler Queen shadow, and it turns, and there's this great kind of like guitar riff, or maybe even just like a bass riff. It sounds like it's from the opening credits, and it's like, and I just love that fucking moment so much. But Sherry was worried that she's like, well, so what does it mean? Does it mean that there's like a monster, and then it's like a monster spirit that infected them? And one thing that she and I talked about a lot last season, and we've kind of talked about in this show too, is the idea of like the Wendigo. And the Wendigo creature, it's like a sort of a cryptid, or it's like a urban legend kind of creature. It's from Native American mythology. And there isn't like a true form, like a werewolf, where it's like, oh, okay, that's the definite Wendigo right there. And so it could be this big hairy monster kind of beast, but also it could be like a very thin, like gaunt person that's just always starving. And I feel like that's kind of where they go with this show, is this like kind of hungered creature, because cannibalism is like such a major part of the show's DNA. And so Sherry didn't like the idea of there being a potential spirit that they brought back from the wilderness, but I actually am okay with that. I like the idea of them almost being possessed by some kind of spirit that is always hungry. But then Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you see the movie Antlers?
No, but that is a Wendigo, and the guy that wrote the story it's based on, he's like the Channel Zero
Nick
creator.
Nick and Tosca?
Yes.
Channel Zero, yes.
Yes. And that short story is fucking great. But the thing is, I think that the Antlers movie is actually not as good as the short story. Did you like it?
I enjoyed the movie. Yes. You didn't see it, you said, right?
Did not. I read the short story though.
Okay. Well, I'm actually Googling on my TV. It's streaming for free on either Hulu or HBO Max. So
I have both.
Yeah, if you're interested in checking that out, either our viewers or you. I thought it was good.
Yeah.
I thought the monster in it looked really cool. I thought the mythos in it was really cool.
Yeah.
It is set in kind of this, mountainous, woodsy town.
Yeah.
So it does feel like it could be part of the same universe.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I'm glad you brought back up the Wendigo, because I was kind of thinking like all the spirit type stuff that we're seeing in this episode, the supernatural stuff, it's leading me towards more of a, kind of a cryptid monster of some kind, or the Wendigo spirit or whatever. And yeah, like another piece of fiction that this show has reminded me of at times is, and I brought this up, is Pet Sematary.
Right.
Both versions of Pet Sematary, the original film, the book. and even the remake, which I didn't think was terrible. I just didn't think they went far enough. I thought the remake of Pet Sematary, I thought the trailer for it was better than the full movie, because I thought I thought the trailer hinted at a lot of like kind of cult worship to this like spirit in the woods.
Yeah.
And they really didn't get into that in the movie.
Mm.
But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. I really love Juliette Lewis as an actress. I just don't. She doesn't. This episode in particular, I didn't feel she worked for me. And
Right.
I do see with her. I see the most difference between like the 1996 to 2021 in terms of like acting style. Like I think the Melanie Linsky and the younger actress who plays Shauna are pretty great.
Yes.
I love Jasmine Savoy Brown and Tony Cypress. And I really like, I think obviously, I think young Misty to Christina Ricci is the best in terms of, they look like they could be the same freaking person.
Yes.
But I love Sophie Thatcher.
Yes.
In 1996 as Nat.
Right.
And I struggle thinking how that character became, like, I get the drug addiction, I get the like dealing with loss and all of that.
Right.
It's the biggest stretch for me, and I felt that here in this episode. I did love the touch though, where her and Lottie are having that like vision together with the light and everything, and she puts her head down. When she puts her head down, it's young Nat.
Love that. Yes.
Because they've really done a great job with young Lottie also. How I thought originally they were going to have her be this like mystic, like I am, I can have visions, but she really plays it as like she doesn't know what's happening to her, and she's scared of her own powers, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And you see those cracks going into older Lottie as well. And I think both actresses who play Lottie are doing a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of see what you mean about the Nat stuff. I did love the Vision stuff though. I thought it was, to end the episode in particular, to go from that scene with the shadow of the Antler Queen and that look of terror on Lottie's face, and then to flash back to end the episode in the way it does with, them running out of the woods in the middle of that blizzard.
Yeah.
Then,
like to bring up that blizzard, I think this discussion is making me think about some of the themes of the show, right? And in the blizzard, when Shauna and Thaisa are kind of lost away from the cabin, and there's a lot of like big gales of wind and snow, they're separated, and it really truly does feel like there is a force controlling the weather. There's a force that buried the body outside of Crystal for to help Misty. It's like, okay, well, the body's buried, so now you're not going to get in trouble right away. And then like it's separated Shauna and Thaisa, and it's like, well, maybe it's trying to keep that baby from being born, right? And Thaisa helps Shauna get back to the cabin, but besides her helping her, there's the rest of the Yellowjackets, or the majority of them, on the porch kind of reciting what they said during this meditation in the beginning of the episode. And I thought it was really interesting that they kind of, like a collective, were saying all the things together. And even Thaisa, who's sort of a skeptic, was saying it when she was with Shauna. And that really plays into the idea of this like hive mind, right? And they're Yellowjackets, and Lottie raises bees in the present day. So there's sort of like this like queen, bee motif going on in the show. And I think that having this discussion with you, I'm kind of noticing this theme of like, there's this sort of like spring and prosperity and youth kind of theme tied in with maybe bees, because the team's called Yellowjackets, and there's like this queen idea, and there's this hive mentality. And then there's this sort of winter, death, isolation, selfishness side, which is like the sort of the Wendigo side, the Antler Queen side. And I think that it's almost like two forces button up heads with each other. You know, it's like in Game of Thrones where you have like the Lord of Light, the fire side, and then you have the ice side, right? Which is like the night,
Yeah.
the whatever the fuck they were called, the others or whatever. And I think that that's maybe where they're going with this show. And I think that Lottie is sort of on one side, and we haven't really established like the counter Lottie yet with the Antler Queen, but that's the one who kind of wins, I think, in the back in the day. You know?
Yeah.
So I would love to hear what the people that watch our shit and comment what they think of that. You know? But just kind of moving it forward. So we kind of discussed everybody except we have Thaisa and we have Shauna. And I personally like the Shauna stuff more this episode. So is it cool we do Thaisa?
Okay, because I didn't like any of the Shauna stuff this episode at all.
Okay.
I'm bored out of my fucking mind with the Adam, with the cop drama, with the high school girl going out with a freaking undercover cop nonsense.
Okay.
Yeah, those were all my nitpicks. Were really in the Shauna stuff.
Why don't we let's go do that then? Let's get through that since you didn't like it. Let's do that, and then we can do the Thaisa stuff with Van last.
All right.
So okay, so Shauna, so you're not digging this part of the show.
I don't. It just doesn't feel like it's moving along at any time. Like the daughter admitted that she's like hanging out with this guy, and who's obviously the cop, and they apparently like they hang out all the time, and he's trying to get information out of her, but he hasn't really gotten anything out of her so far. I don't even like, was there a reason she like compulsively grabbed the check? What was that like?
No.
To like Google his name.
So the woman came over and handed her the check, and I think she just kind of like looked at it for a second, and then she saw this weird name on it, and then she was like, "Oh!" And maybe a regular person, their natural inclination would have been like, "Oh, you gave me the wrong check. Like this is for the wrong party, right?" But I'll give them some leeway with that. Maybe it's like everything that they ordered was on the check, right? So it's not like a mix-up. But yeah, it was kind of like this waitress who was kind of like over the top. She's like, "Oh, I'm leaving. I'm closing out. Here's a check." And so she gives it to her, and that's where she sees his name. And then she Googles him and sees that he's a member of the police force. But you're not digging the fact that he's undercover dating her, huh?
It's just creepy. Like it's really fucking creepy that like I know that. So like apparently when they met a few episodes back, she and her friend were hanging out in a bar.
Yes.
And I'm like, if she's still in high school, like, do they just not card in these small towns in America? Like, I don't, that just the whole aspect of the fact that she's still in high school makes it very strange. Like, it's one of those, like, really simple things that, like, they could have just written her to be a college freshman and I wouldn't have given a shit, like, as weird as that is. Like, but also, the whole hotel thing, that whole sequence was just annoying to me. Like Randy is, and I know he's written to be this giant loser character, but he's a loser in the sense that he doesn't even seem believable to me. He seems so phony, such a phony written character on a show where everybody else is written really well.
Right.
And like he's such a loser that he can't even like jerk off, and he has to pour soap in a condom. And the one cop, Kevin, is like, well, there you have it. Like they just were in a hotel room. And you know, John Mustache over there is like, I'm going to go in and explore because I don't believe. And he has no reason to go in there.
Right.
It's like, so they basically just wrote him to be like the greatest cop ever, where every intuition he has is correct. And like the other guy, Kevin, even says, like, we don't have a warrant. You can't really search around.
Right.
But they do. And he's like grabbing a full condom and sniffing it like this is normal. And he's like bragging about how cool he is. And I'm just like, none of these characters feel real. Like, I believe that fucking Misty would like kill her best friend in 1996. I
Yes.
don't believe anything these two cops are doing. I don't believe anything Shauna and Randy are doing.
Okay.
It just, and I
No,
think it goes back. I think it goes back to the whole Adam thing, where, you know, like the thing about Misty bringing up the destruction of the, you know, I don't know what you call it. The box that would have identified where they were. That to me is like, okay, they remembered a small detail, not a small detail, a major thing that happened, but they remembered that happened like in episode 2 or episode 1, maybe even, of the entire show.
Yeah.
This whole like Adam murder thing, it just feels like this bizarre, extraneous plot that has no connecting thread to anything else other than Shauna might get busted for murder. But how does that tie into the Yellowjackets? How does that tie into the mythos of everything else?
Yeah.
And I really just want them to get to a point with this whole story, because for me, it was the only part of the episode that I was just like, I hate this.
Okay. So I'll give you that too, that it's really stupid that he fucking comes in and like picks up the condom and like kind of looks at it first. He's kind of like, there's something weird about this jizz in here. And then he like smells it. I don't know if I would ever want to fucking smell a condom that was on that guy Randy's dick. You know, that's some kind of weird fetish shit right there. But like, yeah, it's really goofy and it's silly. And you bring up a great point that it doesn't feel connected to all the other stuff that we're always trying to like learn more about and see how it plays out. The only aspect of this story arc that I like is I do like the family kind of all working together as like kind of conspirators, like that her husband and her daughter are now working with her. I like that versus like the daughter that like hates them and is like annoyed by her parents, because I might have mentioned this last week, but like we always kind of get this like spouse character, usually a wife, that's sort of like the foil to the good guy, the main character who's like kind of a bad person, like Breaking Bad and stuff. And another trope that we get often is like the annoying daughter who gives a hard time to the main character who's kind of like a bad person. Like that happened on like Homeland. There was a daughter that we hated on Homeland. But I like that the daughter is kind of more on their side now. But I agree that it does kind of feel like spinning wheels and not connected to what we're interested in.
The Adam storyline made sense to me in the sense that you look at all of these characters, all the Yellowjackets, and they all have lots of issues. They all obviously faced a lot of adversity, but they're all capable of dark shit. Taissa has this like other side that, you know, murders dogs and keeps them in a shrine in her like crawl space. Misty is, we have already established, is basically insane and has murdered several people. You know, and Nat being, you know, obviously deep into, you know, her drug addictions and everything. And then Shauna, you know, who kind of has the most normal life, it seems, of the Yellowjackets today, to show that she's capable of murdering somebody out of a suspicion.
Right.
And if it would have just turned out, if like the big twist in season 1 was that Adam was just a normal guy,
right,
an art student who had, you know, no connection to the Yellowjackets, wasn't blackmailing anybody, and he was just there to show Shauna's dark side. And like Shauna is capable of, you know, gutting the animal when they need somebody to gut the animal. And to show that she has that darkness in her in the modern sense, that I understand. But now it's continued 5 episodes into season 2, where we have a police storyline and we have Randy involved and we have cops that are effectively dating an adult male police officer dating a high school student as as an undercover job, like doing everything he can to get out of like making out with her so he seems less creepy, even though he's fucking creepy.
Oh man.
And I don't know. This
You hit
this
me on the
whole
head, yeah.
story arc didn't work for me on
Yeah.
a show where everybody else's story arc kind of did.
Yeah. Well, this show, they've said before that it's going to be 5 seasons. It's a 5 seasons, storyline. And when you have that, when you have something mapped out that far, right? Because it's like what, like 10 episodes per season. So we're talking like 50 episodes. You're going to have these storylines that are, like, to quote Lord of the Rings, because we do have Frodo in this show. It's like butter spread thin on too much bread, right? Where it's like, okay, well, let's move forward. And this isn't going anywhere. You've kind of swayed me against this Shauna storyline in the present day a little bit more. In the past, she's kind of freaking out about Lottie whispering to her unborn baby, and that baby looks like it's coming next episode.
I think also that, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think that also ties into my dislike of the Shauna situation, is that on the other side of 2021 characters, they're all coming together.
Yeah.
So like Misty is in search of Nat, who is with Lottie, and Thaisa ends up with Van, and those two arcs are going to collide, and all of the Yellowjackets. And then Shauna's out, doing family murder cover-up, and it feels like a completely isolated thing. And Shauna, to me, is the heart of the show. Like,
yeah.
And I did like the fact that now she's completely isolated. Like Thaisa was like her one go-to person, it felt like. But now Thaisa, in order to appease Van, has kind of joined up with Lottie's group, and taken part in some of the rituals. And she feels completely isolated.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up with Lottie like fucking rubbing her belly and talking to her kid, and she freaks the fuck out, which I think is totally justified. And then, she runs off right as the blizzard starts, and she's lucky to make it back. And then, like you said, it looks as if she's about to become a mother.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the musical cue helped out with that at the very end.
What did it play, like a fucking lullaby or something?
No, it played Mother by
right. Danzig.
He just directed Veronica.
Danzig.
Yeah.
But you know what, Danny, I'm glad that you kind of doubled back on that, because there is one other part I wanted to mention, and it's in the Nat storyline, the 1996 Nat storyline, because Nat is the one that's the most against all of the weird Lottie mystic shit in the past. And she feels very isolated, even though she's surrounded by people and she's with Travis. Even though she's got a boyfriend, she does kind of seem like she's alone too in the past. Yeah. Travis, we got to talk about Javi for a second too. So Javi's back, and he's not talking to anyone. He's not saying what happened to him for all the months that he was gone. Travis tries to talk to him. Travis is mad at young Nat because he knows that she made it seem like Javi was dead. And she goes to explain it, but he's not having anything. What's really interesting about this part is that Javi doesn't even talk to Travis. He actually talks to the coach at the very end of the episode. And the thing that got me pretty much just as excited as the Antler Queen's shadow was when Javi tells the coach, my friend, or she told me not to come back. Right? Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's implying that there was some woman, some female character in the woods that told him to stay away from them. And so that's interesting to me. It's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, it's one of those, like, it feels like one of those moments in the last 30 seconds of an episode of Lost where a character will be like, where are we? And then cue that music, and then you're like, oh shit, what's going on? Like, and it really hooks you for the next episode. Mm-hmm. And I like that stuff, and I like that you brought up they have a plan, and I'm excited for the plan, and I want to see more of that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the plan, just kind of people getting the storylines getting stretched out and stuff. I personally did not really dig Thaisa's storyline this episode because it did also feel like spinning wheels. Like it's like, okay, well, we got to Van and we see Van's life, and Van essentially, I guess, like just for the sake of learning what happened to Van, that makes this a good episode or a good story because at least we know what happened to her for the most part. Like she's sort of gone into this life of like nostalgia where she has all these movie posters for like 80s movies, maybe some 90s movies. She's got a video store where she has one of those fucking car tape rewinders, right?
When I saw that, I literally did the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where I went, oh,
Yeah.
because my parents had one of those.
Right.
In like when we first moved into the building that like we moved into when I was 7, I remember
Yeah.
the car rewinder.
Rewinder.
I was like,
Heck
oh
yeah.
my God.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like she's kind of living in the past, and we learned a little bit about her past. We learned that she had a horrible relationship with her mom, and then her mom ended up having cancer and dying. So that's happened in the interim time. Besides that, there was one really interesting point that happened where someone else was talking about Van, I think, in one of the other storylines, and they said that she came to Shauna's wedding. So I always kind of thought, and I've said this a couple of times talking to you, that like I always thought that like Van wasn't part of the people that returned to on the plane or whatever when they came back, but clearly she was.
Yeah,
And she,
that
yeah,
line kind of threw me because she acts like she hasn't seen Thaisa since the wilderness,
right,
but then she does say that she saw Thaisa at Shauna's
Shauna's wedding,
wedding.
right.
So, but then again, I'm like, well, maybe Shauna and Jeff got married like soon after because like she was graduating. So maybe
Right.
they got married like after high school, right after she returned.
Yeah. I'm guessing they were pretty young, because their daughter is like high school age and they've been gone for like 25 years. I mean, like the crash was 25 years ago. So, like, yeah, if the daughter's like 18, they probably got married kind of soon.
Yeah,
But
so I guess like she still hasn't seen Thaisa probably in
yeah,
18 to 20
18
years.
years. Yeah, yeah, 18 or more. Yeah. And then just some more interesting things about that part. The interesting part is Van, because Thais is essentially there just to kind of move the plot along. Um, Van Taisa finds some pills, and Van says, "Well, those are for my mother when she had cancer." But then like she takes a pill at the very end, and you can tell she was like dying to have one. So I
Yeah.
guess Van had some kind of drug issue. Van also recognizes like the other Taisa's other, and that's the one that says we're not where we're supposed to be or something like that.
Yeah.
And you don't see where they go, and it's like, okay, well, maybe they go into the bedroom and have sex, or maybe they're gonna go they're most likely they're gonna go to the cult location.
Yeah, I think like in like the next week on Yellowjackets, they seem to hint that everyone but Shauna, I think,
Yeah,
ends up together
right.
at
At the
some point. Or maybe Shauna ends up there too,
yeah,
because she's avoiding the cops. I don't know.
yeah,
But
yeah. Well, Shauna in this episode, she starts to kind of get wind of this other plot line because they talk about the feds interrogating fucking Kenny or whatever the hell his name is, Donnie, about Nat, right? And she's like, "Oh, what's going on with Nat and the feds?" And that's when Elijah Wood had interrogated him. So,
Randy. Yeah, yeah,
Randy,
yeah.
there you go. I said Kenny and I said Donnie.
Well, because
You
there's
know?
Kevin. Kevin is the cop
Okay,
who has
Kevin is the
the one
cop.
night stand with Nat. He was like her best friend in high school.
Right.
And then there's Randy, the big dopey friend.
Right, yeah. Okay, yeah, Randy. God bless him. Squirting stuff into a condom because he can't finish. Anyway, that's probably a good note to end our episode on. And so I've always enjoyed talking about not Lovecraft. What the fuck am I saying? Yellowjackets with you. There's a cat right there. Is that Kobashi?
It is.
Oh, hi, Kobashi. But Danny and I, we did this nice and early on a Saturday morning. So this is going to come out Saturday morning, probably. And we're going to get these out as soon as we can for y'all. As soon as I see Evil Dead Rise, I will record with Danny. He's going to see it again tonight. But Danny,
Yes.
you have a Evil Dead Rise short that seems to be doing well on our channel, right?
Yeah, non-spoiler, of course, review of Evil Dead Rise. 30 seconds is up on our channel. I've been putting up a few. Yesterday, I did a little fog celebration. It was April 21st, so it's the horror community celebrates Fog Day. Also, last night was the return of Joe Bob. He did a Lucio Fulci double feature. He played the original zombie and the Beyond. I fell asleep at the end of Zombie, but Charlotte finally got to watch Shark versus Zombie in that.
Yes.
So that was fun. Aside from our Yellow Jacket reviews, we have our reviews of our countdown to Evil Dead Rise, Maniac Cop, Drag Me to Hell. We did Lee Cronin's first movie, The Hole in the Ground. Darkman, of course. Bunch of stuff up on the channel. Obviously, our Yellow Jackets reviews are coming out every week.
Mm-hmm.
Evil Dead Rise full review with loads of spoilers as soon as Pete gets his ass to the movie theater.
There you go. Get your ass to Mars. All right. All right, guys. So we'll see you next week for Yellow Jackets. Make sure you subscribe, leave your comments too, and we'll be here for episode